Suleiman I, known as Suleiman the Magnificent, was the 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, ruling from 1520 to 1566. He became one of the most famous and powerful rulers in the history of the Ottoman Empire. Under his leadership, the Ottoman Empire reached the peak of its power and influence, becoming a world center. Suleiman became famous as a military strategist, political reformer, and patron of the arts. He expanded the empire's territory, conquering significant lands in Europe, Asia, and Africa. One of the biggest conquests was the conquest of Hungary in 1526 and the siege of Vienna in 1529, although the city was not taken. Suleiman also expanded his possessions in the Middle East, annexing the territories of Arab lands, including Egypt, and carried out successful campaigns in North Africa. In addition, he carried out a number of reforms that improved the administrative structure of the empire, strengthening the central government. His reign marked a golden age in Ottoman culture, architecture, and literature. Suleiman the Magnificent became a symbol of the might of the Ottoman Empire and left an indelible mark in history. But he remained in history not only because of his conquests, but also because of his cruelty. Sultan Suleiman mercilessly executed two of his sons, and by the end of his life, there was only one heir left. Today I will tell the life stories of Shehzad Mustafa, Bayezid and Jihangir, which are still controversial among historians. Sultan Suleiman had many sons, but some of them died of illnesses in childhood. Therefore, I will only tell you about those who have lived to adulthood. Sultan Suleiman's eldest son was Shehzad Mustafa, born in 1515 by a concubine named Mahidevran. His contemporaries called him the most merciful and generous. The soldiers loved him not only for his professional qualities as a military commander, but also for his kindness. Shehzad treated both Muslims and Christians equally well. But all the Janissaries, the Ottoman soldiers, were from Christian families, but they converted to Islam, often against their will. In the traditions of the Ottoman Empire, the heirs, or Shehzada, were trained to govern the country, holding the posts of Sanjak Beys in the provinces. The eldest son, as a rule, became the Sanjak Bey of Manisa, and in 1533, Shehzad Mustafa, the eldest son of Suleiman, went there with his mother Mahidevran. This was his triumph. In Manisa, Mustafa was popular with the people and had a good reputation among the Janissaries. However, his relationship with his father was deteriorating. In 1541, after Mustafa's negotiations with the Austrian ambassador, Suleiman sent him to Amasya, a remote province. One of the reasons mentioned is to distance him from the capital and isolate him from connections with important people. Meanwhile, Mehmed, the son of Hurrem Sultan, Sultan Suleiman's other wife, was sent to Manisa. Mehmet Shehzad was born in 1521. He was the first son of Hurrem Sultan, Sultan Suleiman's beloved wife, and her eldest child. But according to tradition, he was not the main contender for the throne, but Shehzad Mustafa, the son of Mahidevran, who was 6 years older than Mehmet. Mehmet was raised the same way as the rest of the Shehzadas. In the story, he is always mentioned as a very literate, reasonable, calm person. It is known that his father was madly in love with him. Perhaps not only because of his personality, but also because he was their first son with their beloved Hurrem. Mehmet Shehzad went to manage the Sanjak at a rather late age, 20 years old. And this Sanjak became the same Manisa. Sultan Suleiman removed his eldest delinquent son Mustafa from the post of Sanjakbi Manisa, sending him to rule Amasya, and replaced him with Mehmet. This was a huge blow to the elder Shehzada and his mother, as they were demonstratively shown that Mustafa was no longer the main contender for the throne. Let me remind you that traditionally the Sanjak Beys of Manisa became sultans in the Ottoman Empire, since it was this Sanjak that was closest to the capital. This change of power took place in 1541. But after that, Mehmet was not constantly in the Sanjak. He, like other Shehzadas, participated in military campaigns, where he proved himself to be a good warrior. Probably, because of this long military campaign, Mehmet did not have time to acquire many offspring. It is only known that he had a daughter, Humasa. He participated with his father in a campaign on the island of Corfu in 1537. Then, in 1541, he participated with his brother Selim in a campaign against Buda. In 1543, in connection with the capture of Stolny Belgrade, Shehzad was sent to his Sanjaks. Shehzad Mehmet himself participated in the celebration of this event on Wednesday, October 31, 1543 in Manisa. On the evening of the same day, he fell ill, and a week later he died on the night of Tuesday, November 7th. The official cause of his death is smallpox. On October 18, Shehzad was taken to Istanbul by ship. Suleiman ordered the architect Sinan to immediately build a tomb. Subsequently, the project was supplemented with a mosque and a madrasa. The complex was under construction for 5 years, and 300,000 gold was spent on its construction. A throne was subsequently placed over Shehzad's gravestone by order of Sultan Suleiman, which proves once again that it was Mehmet he saw as his successor. Suleiman uttered the words that have remained forever in history: "The most outstanding of all Shehzad is my Sultan Mehmet." In his short life, which was 22 years old, Mehmet managed to build mosques, chapels, madrasas and even water pipes. You can see the burial of Shehzad with your own eyes when you are in Istanbul. However, even after the death of Shehzad Mehmed, Mustafa was not reinstated to the post of Sanjabi Manisa. He was replaced by another son of Hürrem Sultan, Shehzad Selim. And Shehzad Mustafa was executed in 1553. According to some contemporaries, Hürrem and her son-in-law, Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha, turned the Sultan against Mustafa, accusing him of plotting against the Sultan and organizing riots to overthrow Suleiman I. In 1553, during the war against the Persians, Rustam Pasha invited Mustafa to join his father's army and at the same time warned Suleiman himself that Mustafa was coming to him in order to kill him. Suleiman believed that his life was in danger and ordered his son's execution. When Mustafa entered his father's tent to meet him, Suleiman's guards surrounded the Sultan's tent so that the disgraced heir to the throne could not escape. As a result, during the fight with the mute executioners, Mustafa was killed by Zala Mahmud, Aga. A few days later, Mustafa's 7-year-old son, Mehmed, was also executed. It is still unknown whether Mustafa was really going to overthrow the Sultan or whether he was slandered. Mustafa's death sparked mass protests among soldiers and janissaries, his supporters. There was even an impostor posing as the real Shehzad. After the unrest, Suleiman was forced to dismiss Rustam Pasha from the post of Grand Vizier and return him to Istanbul. Mahidevran, Mustafa's mother, spent her whole life trying to protect her son from political enemies, but could not prevent the tragedy. After Mustafa's execution, a mausoleum was built on his grave in Bursa, where his mother was later buried. Speaking about the death of Shehzad Mustafa, one cannot fail to mention the tragic death of his paternal brother, Shehzad Jihangir. Another son is Hürrem Sultan. Shehzad Jihangir was the youngest child of Hürrem Sultan and Sultan Suleiman. He was born in 1531. At an early age, Jihangir was diagnosed with a malformation associated with the development of the bone system. Outwardly, he was short and ill-built, not very healthy. That's how the Venetian Niccolò Machiel described him. Jihangir was very much loved by his mother and father, and they never left him. It is known that the Padishah took his son everywhere with him, including on military campaigns. Sultan Suleiman Jihangir also took part in the military campaign during which he executed Shehzad Mustafa. And 21 days after Mustafa's execution, Jihangir also died. Due to the proximity of their death dates, a legend has emerged that Jihangir died of anguish and grief over his brother's execution. Many people dispute it, arguing that when Shehzad Mustafa left for Sanjak, Jihangir was very young, that is, he did not have the opportunity to communicate with his brother enough and get attached to him. However, I found at least 3 proofs that she and Jihangir could have had a rather close relationship. 1. They could see each other on military campaigns, where Suleiman took Jihangir with him, at various celebrations and funeral ceremonies. For example, it could be the wedding of Mirima Sultan, their sister, the funeral of Mehmet Shehzad, etc. 2. Historians have found a poetic correspondence in which 3 people participated: Sultan Suleiman, Shehzad Jihangir and Shehzad Mustafa. That is, the brothers also corresponded. It is quite possible that in addition to this general correspondence, there was also a personal one. 3. And the Venetian Niccolò Machiel reported to his leadership that there was a quarrel between Sultan Suleiman and Jihangir. It happened shortly after the execution of Shehzad Mustafa. While on a horse ride, Jihangir accused his father of cruelty, and the Sultan got angry and loudly cursed his son. Jihangir was buried in the turban of his elder brother Mehmet on the territory of the Shehzad Mehmet Jami Mosque. Later, by order of Sultan Suleiman, a mosque was built by architect Mimar Sinan in memory of Jihangir. Unfortunately, it was completely destroyed during the fire. In its place in the 19th century, a new mosque was built, which also bears his name. After the execution of Shehzad Mustafa and the death of Jihangir, Sultan Suleiman had only two sons left, Selim and Bayezid, born Hurrem Sultan. The eldest was Selim, born in 1524. Ambassador Busbek described Selim with such epithets. He looked like his mother, fat, with chubby cheeks, red face and unsmiling. The soldiers made fun of him among themselves, saying that he ate too much barley porridge. Ali Mustafa Effendi described him as a man of medium height, reddish blonde, with bluish-brown eyes, a brown beard, plump and lisping. Selim also always ate from porcelain plates, which were believed to prevent poisoning. Navajero in 1553 called Selim a stingy, hypocritical and dissolute man. Selim has always paid a lot of attention to his safety. He tried not to make suspicious connections, so as not to attract the attention of his father. After the death of his elder brother, Shehzad Mehmet, it was Sultan Suleiman who sent him to rule the Sanjak of Manisa. And after the execution of Shehzad Mustafa being the Sanjakbi of Manisa and the first in seniority of Shehzad since November 1553, he was closer to the throne than his brother Bayezid. Shehzad Bayezid, the son of Sultan Suleiman and Hurrem Sultan, was born in 1525 or 1526. In 1546, Bayezid was given control of the Sanjak of Konya, where he actively improved his education, gathering scientists and poets around him. But by nature, Shehzad Bayezid was a real rebel, unlike the calm and cautious Selim. In 1554, during the tragic events that resulted from the execution of his elder brother, Shehzad Mustafa, Bayezid came under suspicion. His father instructed him to lead the uprising of the false Mustafa, a man who claimed to be the survivor of Shehzad Mustafa. Bayezid was slow to punish the participants in the conspiracy and made strategic mistakes, which caused Suleiman's displeasure. However, the intervention of Hurrem Sultan helped to avoid severe consequences. Bayezid considered his brother unworthy of the throne, openly accusing him of an excessive penchant for entertainment. The intrigues around the brothers were fueled by Lala Mustafa Pasha, an ambitious politician who dreamed of becoming Grand Vizier. Mustafa Pasha convinced Bayezid that Selim was incapable of ruling, and promised him support in the struggle for the throne. However, his actions only intensified the conflict. To reduce the tension, Suleiman sent his sons to remote Sanjaks. Selim was ordered to go to Konya, and Bayezid to Amasya. Bayezid saw in this a hint that he might suffer the fate of Shehzad Mustafa, who also ruled Amasya before his execution. The brothers' conflict escalated when Bayezid's supporters began forming their own army in 1558. Soon he had an army of 20,000 people, including Kurds, Turkmens, and even some Janissaries. On May 30, 1559, a decisive battle took place on the plains of Konya between Selim, who received military support from his father, and Bayezid. Bayezid's army was defeated, and he himself retreated to Amasya. A large monetary reward was announced for his head. Selim and his supporters, including the Grand Viziers and Beylerbeys, began to persecute Bayezid. Realizing that the situation was hopeless, Bayezid decided to seek refuge with the Persian Shah Tahmasp. He went there with his 4 sons. The Iranian Shah Tahmasp solemnly welcomed Bayezid, organizing a magnificent ceremony. However, Suleiman soon began diplomatic negotiations, demanding the extradition of his son. In 1560, the Shah agreed to give Bayezid and his sons for ransom. In 1561, they were handed over to the Ottoman ambassadors. Soon, by order of Suleiman, Bayezid and his 4 sons were executed on Persian lands. Bayezid's dying wish to see his sons before his death was not fulfilled. The bodies of Bayezid and his sons were immediately embalmed and taken by cart to the city of Van, from where they were to be transported for burial to Bursa or Istanbul. However, on the way, a message was received from Sultan Suleiman that Shehzad and his sons should be buried in Shivas Anatolia. So, in 1561, only one son of Sultan Suleiman, Selim, nicknamed the Drunkard, remained alive. And it was he who was destined to become Sultan after his father's death, in 1566. Selim served as Sultan for 8 years and died at the age of 50, probably due to a stroke. He was buried in the courtyard of the Hagia Sophia Mosque along with his 5 young sons Osman, Mustafa, Suleiman, Jihangir, Abdullah, executed by order of the new Sultan Murad III.